The Juukan Gorge debacle claims the scalps of top Rio Tinto executives. Half a million people flee infernos raging across the United States. A desperate plea by the families of Australian men missing from a capsized livestock ship. And it's all in the translation. Why the Aboriginal name of WA's new museum is raising eyebrows. Hello, James McHale with ABC News. A shareholder revolt over the destruction of an ancient Aboriginal site in the Pilbara has forced 3 of Rio Tinto's top executives out of the company. Rio blew up the Juukan Caves to make way for mining. Traditional owners have welcomed the departure of the executives, but want Aboriginal people to be given more control over the protection of their heritage.
It's come after days of speculation. The destruction of the 46,000-year-old Aboriginal heritage sites has ended the careers of 3 top Rio Tinto executives. Chief Executive Jean-Sébastien Jacques, iron ore boss Chris Salisbury and Corporate Relations Executive Simone Niven.
I think there will be a lot of people happy. I mean, I've been sitting with elders today and they are happy and they've expressed that happiness.
We're quite pleased with the outcome today, but we know that's kind of one step on a big journey.
The blast generated a huge public backlash. Days later, the company offered an apology.
I'd like to say very sorry to the Putu, Kunti, Karama and Pinakura people.
But that didn't quell the disquiet. Then the company cut bonuses for the 3 executives now departing. In the end, their exits came after a shareholder revolt by the likes of billion-dollar investor Australian Super, Hester and reportedly the Future Fund. But even the executives' departure is not enough for some Indigenous leaders.
I want a genuine apology as an Australian citizen, and I'm sure the traditional owners do too. Secondly, reparations involves compensation.
In a written statement, the PKKP people said they did not want to comment on Rio's executive changes, but would continue to work with the company and advocate for change, saying, "We cannot and will not allow this type of devastation to occur ever again." WA's Aboriginal Affairs Minister wants to see Aboriginal people on company boards.
That, I think, might have provided Rio with some guidance very early on, or with some warning signs very early on around the deterioration or the absence of their position in the Pilbara.
While the company's image has taken a beating, observers believe Rio's market position will remain strong.
I suspect they'll be rewarded for making a decision they probably should have made some time ago. The writing was on the wall when a lot of their big investors turned against management.
The ABC approached Rio Tinto for an interview, but a company spokesman said no one was available. Eliza Borrello, ABC News.
Tension is growing within the National Cabinet. The WA Premier is deeply unhappy about what he considers unfair criticism levelled by the Morrison government at Labor states. Mark McGowan says the attacks make it more difficult for the National Cabinet to deal with the pandemic in a bipartisan way. Jacob Kagi explains what's sparked this tension.
Well, it has come to the fore because of a dispute over the Queensland border this week. Queensland Health refused to allow a woman who travelled from Canberra to attend her father's funeral, a decision that was blasted by the Morrison government with particular criticism for the Queensland Premier, Anastasia Palaszczuk. Mark McGowan staunchly defended the Queensland Premier today, and he made plain that he was deeply unhappy with the criticism from the Commonwealth that he sees as political. Mr McGowan accused the Morrison government of not showing respect, singling out Peter Dutton and Josh Frydenberg for criticism and urging the Commonwealth to back off criticising the states for decisions he says are focused on saving lives.
And especially when they single out the Labor states, but they ignore the Liberal states. I mean, don't you think it looks a little bit political when you only pick the Labor states to criticise, but you don't criticise the Liberal states that have exactly the same rules in place? I mean, you know, it's pretty see-through when Mr Dutton and Mr Frydenberg do these things.
And Jacob, what will it mean for the future of National Cabinet?
Well, the Premier says National Cabinet will continue even as political fights come forward, and that's something that's inevitable with state elections looming in both Queensland and then WA. But Mr McGowan made it clear that he thinks the criticism being levelled at Labor states, such as Labor state premiers such as Anastasia Palaszczuk, Daniel Andrews and himself, is unhelpful for the National Cabinet process. And public fights like this make it harder for Australia's leaders to work together. For the most part, relations between the WA government and the federal coalition have been very strong through this pandemic. But Mr McGowan's frustrations are clearly growing, and he warns it's harmful to the bipartisan approach Australia has used to deal with COVID-19.
Jacob Kager there. Western Australia's started a new COVID-19 testing regime for frontline border workers, as it marks 5 months since the last locally acquired case was detected. The voluntary program encourages workers at the state's border, ports, airports and hotel quarantine facilities who aren't showing any symptoms of the virus to be tested every week.
This is just another way that we can continue to keep Western Australians safe. It's about making sure that we're doing all the things necessary to ensure that we've got great line of sight, that we can make sure that we understand any outbreak of the disease and remain vigilant.
The extra testing will run until the end of November. Mr Cook is reminding people with cold and flu symptoms to also get tested. The families of 2 Australian men who were on board a livestock ship that capsized in the East China Sea have made an emotional plea to the Commonwealth to lead a renewed search. Japan's Coast Guard scaled back its efforts just days ago, but relatives of the missing men are hopeful the crew had been wearing life vests and they could still be alive.
A desperate embrace. The Order family is clinging onto hope.
We are speaking with our hearts in our hands.
Their son, vet Lucas Order, was one of 2 Australians on board a live export ship that capsized off Japan's coast more than a week ago.
We beg you not to stop looking for Lucas and the other people missing at sea.
Last week, authorities found a second survivor, a lone Filipino sailor floating in a lifeboat. But days later, Japan's Coast Guard effectively called off its full-time search, devastating loved ones.
We understand that politicians and the Office of Foreign Affairs and Trade are working on potential solutions to recommence the search. Regardless, we cannot comprehend how the decision was made to stop the search.
News that crew members had been wearing life vests and preparing to leave on boats has prompted calls for the Australian government to step in and lead a new search effort.
We implore you not to give up on the chance of there being survivors,
which have been backed by the family of the second missing Australian, William Mainprize.
Will was such a survivor, and he'd be out there helping all the crew he's with.
The 27-year-old from Sydney had been working as a wildlife guide in Tasmania before boarding the ship to help look after the animals.
I know that he would really have no fear out there, as most people would. So that's kind of a blessing, but also we really miss him, and we want anyone to help.
In a joint statement late this afternoon, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Foreign Affairs Minister acknowledged the family's distress and said Australia is encouraging Japan's ongoing air and sea efforts and continues to offer the Japanese authorities any supporting capability needed. Japan's Coast Guard has assured Australia it will not give up the search for those missing.
There was collaboration internationally with MH370. After 7 days, we feel we owe it to these people to keep searching for them.
Kate McKenna, ABC News, Brisbane.
When the government announced the new WA museum had been given the Aboriginal name Bulletin, it raised the eyebrows of a Noongar professor of Indigenous Studies at the University of WA. While Bulletin was officially translated to many stories, the Noongar scholar says it actually means many lies.
The highly anticipated WA Museum unveiled its new name this week.
Bulletin means many stories in Noongar language.
WA Museum, Bulletin, is a place we share those stories.
Bulletin.
But Noongar professor Len Collard isn't sold on the choice of name.
Bulletin meant false or deception or lies. Hence, it certainly raised my eyes.
Professor Collard, who is a Whadjuk Noongar elder, has spent years creating a database of 20,000 Noongar words. He says that data tells him Bardip has historically been used in reference to telling lies, and he wants to see the name changed.
The ministers and the other stakeholders need to have a chinwag and really get this back onto the right track, because it is a wonderful story to be shared, and I don't think that people want to be associated with a lot of lies and deceit and falsehood.
The name was chosen after extensive consultation with Perth's Noongar Budja Language Centre, and the WA Museum's CEO is strongly standing by it.
We're very confident that we went through all the appropriate processes. We've got the appropriate authorities, as I say, who are very strongly standing by this translation as the correct one. And as I say, from our point of view, that's good enough for us.
Look, I understand there's a different interpretation of many words that are used in the Noongar language from the predated 1900s, but Bardup is a word that was recorded for stories, custom and legends.
The new museum is due to open on the 21st of November. Rhiannon Shine, ABC News.
Landlords of business and residential properties are being warned about a tyre dumping scam, which has left one victim with more than $100,000 in disposal costs. Scammers have dumped hundreds of thousands of old tyres at this semi-rural facility in Wollongong, southeast of Perth. Authorities say offenders approach tyre retailers or wrecking yards and offer to dispose of worn-out tyres at cut-price rates. They then dump them at leased properties.
Certainly in Western Australia, this is the largest operation of this type that my investigators have come across.
Property owners are then left with hefty clean-up costs. Offenders face fines of more than $62,000 and up to $125,000 for a body corporate. To finance now, and the Australian share market followed Wall Street's lead, ending the day lower. A sell-off in mining and tech stocks saw the market record its fourth consecutive week of losses. Here's Philip Lasker.
Volatility, that's the name of the game at the moment. And as you can see, volatility is right up there. Change is in the air. Since August, European investors have been switching from the tech sector to areas like cars, travel and leisure. It looks like they're betting on a vaccine, and it pays to pick winners early. The tech sector rout was primarily behind Wall Street's sharp turnaround, but Asian markets proved resilient. Not Australia, though. The all-tech index was off much more than the broader market. Investors presumably welcomed the departure of Rio Tinto senior executives because its share price fell less than the other big miners. And here's something interesting. Government support has boosted spending growth for younger recipients more than older age groups. That suggests tax cuts for high-income earners may not have the desired effect of stimulating the economy. Unlike equities, the Australian dollar has been reasonably stable at around 72.8 US cents. Well, some see the market volatility as a reaction to the uncertainty surrounding the US election and its stimulus measures, but it's got more to do with the fact that this is my last day in the office after nearly 37 years. That green line, that's my salary, so job seeker looks pretty enticing. But sadly, the blue line does not represent my share portfolio. But you don't do it for the money. You do it for the privilege of being a part of the many iconic programs broadcast by an organisation which has never been more vital. I'm so grateful to all those who've helped shape my career, to my family who really don't care about the All Ords, and of course, you, the taxpayer. I've been living the dream, so thank you for making it all possible. And that certainly is finance.
The New South Wales Premier has stared down a threat by the Nationals to abandon the coalition government over a policy protecting koala habitat. Gladys Berejiklian gave the Nationals until 9 o'clock this morning to back down or be sacked from their positions in Cabinet. The Nationals' leader and Deputy Premier John Barilaro stepped back from the brink during crisis talks this morning. Afterwards, he insisted it was not a defeat.
Did we concede? Of course we've conceded some part, but so has the Liberals.
What we've seen out of John Barilaro is the greatest act of political bastardry in quite some time. I think that the disloyalty that we've seen out of the Deputy Premier makes his position untenable.
The Labor opposition says it will move a motion of no confidence in the government when Parliament resumes next week. Families of 3 Australian soldiers murdered in Afghanistan fear the killer could soon walk free after he was flown out of the war-torn country. The Taliban prisoner, known as Hekmatullah, has been transferred to Qatar ahead of peace talks brokered by the Trump administration.
For the best part of a decade, Hugh and Jenny Pote have grieved for a murdered son.
The insider attack was an incident that should never have occurred.
Private Robert Pote was gunned down on base at the hands of a rogue Afghan soldier he was serving with. Also killed in the so-called green-on-blue attack, Lance Corporal Stefan Milosevic and sapper James Martin. Their killer, known as Hekmatullah, escaped to Pakistan, where he was eventually recaptured. Now, after 7 years behind bars, he and 5 other Taliban prisoners have been transferred unshackled from Kabul to Doha on a specially chartered flight.
The reason for that is fairly obvious, and that is that he will be released in a country other than Afghanistan.
The federal government says assurances have been given that won't be the case.
The Australian government's position is that a full custodial sentence should be served with no reprieve.
The Taliban demanded that Hekmatullah and the other prisoners be flown out of Afghanistan before weekend peace talks brokered by the United States. And Donald Trump's pushing for a deal with the former enemy so American soldiers can soon leave the war-torn country.
And we're getting along very, very well with the Taliban and very well with Afghanistan and its representatives, and we'll see how it all goes. It's a negotiation.
Negotiating directly with a terrorist organisation rather than taking into consideration its longest-serving ally, Australia. The Americans have got a lot to answer for here, a hell of a lot.
And he believes the families of other Australians killed in the US-led war will be just as angry. Andrew Green, ABC News, Canberra.
The death toll from unprecedented fires on the US West Coast continues to climb, with more than a dozen lives lost. Hundreds of thousands of residents have been evacuated as blazes burn out of control in Washington, California and Oregon. North America correspondent Catherine Diss reports.
Oh my God.
Fire rips through suburban streets in Tacoma, south of Seattle. This home goes up in flames. The family next door was still inside.
Hey, fire, fire, fire.
Veteran Stephen Biles was driving past. He stopped to warn them.
Yes, everybody get out of the house now. You're going to have to turn the water. Everybody get out, please, right now. I'm so sorry, ma'am, but you got to grab your stuff. We got to go.
They got out in time, taking refuge down the street. Others haven't been so lucky. Among the dead, a 1-year-old boy who died as his parents fled a fire in Washington. Around 100 blazes are burning across a dozen states in the country's west. Washington, Oregon and California are the hardest hit. Most of the property damage overnight was in Oregon. 5 small towns in the state's Cascade Mountains have been left in ruins. Charred and twisted metal is all that remains.
Everything was gone. We tried to take as much as we could, but we didn't think it would get this devastating.
3 people were killed as fire took hold in Northern California. This man escaped the flames.
And I just did the things you do before a fire hits, you know, get stuff out of the way, and I just got in my car and came down here.
It's one of those things that you just never dream, nightmare, that would ever happen.
The smoke was so thick, skies in San Francisco turned an eerie orange. This is just the start of the country's fire season. Crews are already struggling to cope. Catherine Diss, ABC News, Washington.
The actor Diana Rigg, whose career spanned 5 decades and covered an incredible range of roles, has died at the age of 82. She'd already found success with the Royal Shakespeare Company before taking on the role of Emma Peel, the stylish and formidable secret agent in the 60s spy drama The Avengers. She made the show wildly popular. When she learned the cameramen were getting paid more than her, she took action off screen.
I've always said that I thought equal pay gets you a long way to be treated equally by a man.
Later, she played the only character to marry James Bond, and a new generation of fans saw her as a powerful matriarch in Game of Thrones.
I've known a great many clever men. I've outlived them all.
Diana Rigg was diagnosed with cancer in March. Fellow stars, including Vanessa Redgrave and George Lazenby, have paid tribute, saying she was both brilliant and funny. In sport, Fremantle coach Justin Longmuir says where his side finishes in the draft order isn't even on his mind as the Dockers prepare for their final 2 games of the season. The club sits 13th, but Longmuir says his focus is on building a winning culture rather than what pick they receive.
Justin Longmuir won't be handing out a spot in the side without a good reason. The first-year coach determined to maintain integrity at the selection table despite finals being out of reach. And he won't be swayed by where his side sits in the draft order.
We see the honour of being in the team and performing well. It's your right to stay in the team, so we're not going to make any unnecessary changes.
But there will be one forced change for tomorrow's clash with North Melbourne. Reece Conker out with a hamstring strain.
That's a terrific tackle from behind.
Young defender Toby Watson returns to the side for his 3rd AFL match. While the next generation of stars has emerged at Fremantle,
And he has kicked one of the goals of the season.
there is one veteran the coach is keen to see play on. David Mundy approaching the end of his 16th season at the club.
He's instilling all his experience and knowledge onto our younger mids, and I think that's starting to shine through in their performances. So, I hope he goes on for another year.
Mundy could reach Matthew Pavlich's games record if he goes around one more time. Tom Wildy, ABC News.
West Coast coach Adam Simpson says yesterday's thrilling 15-point win over St Kilda was the best in his time at the club. But it came at a huge cost, and Vice-Captain Jeremy McGovern is facing an extended stint on the sidelines with a hamstring injury.
Have a look at this. Nat Nui with a force clear.
West Coast has secured a spot in the finals for a 6th straight season.
To Darling, on to Kelly. Little right foot around the body. They've hit the front. They've got it. West Coast are back in front.
Missing a host of stars, the Eagles dug deep, kicking the final 4 goals to claim victory.
One of our best wins for the club in my time. So, yeah, really brave effort.
The win came at a cost, with Jeremy McGovern suffering a hamstring strain before half-time.
So that's huge.
Its seriousness still to be determined.
It didn't look like a twinge, so we'll find out in the next couple of days.
The standing captain joins a growing list of first-choice players watching from the sidelines. Brendan Archie, Dom Sheed, Jack Redden, Lewis Shetter and Mark Hutchings all casualties from the loss to the Western Bulldogs, while Luke Shuey won't feature until finals with dual hamstring strains.
We're just not built to play 5 games in 19 days. You know, regardless of the reduced game time, it's just not. There's guys dropping left, right and centre.
West Coast has a week break before facing North Melbourne on Thursday in their final game of the regular season. If they eventually win through to another grand final, they will be a part of history. The AFL confirming a nighttime bounce down for the first decider outside of Victoria. Bounce down at the Gabba will be at 6:30 p.m. Queensland time. Tom Wildy, ABC News.
Serena Williams has been knocked out of this year's US Tennis Open after a semi-final loss to arch rival Victoria Azarenka. The 38-year-old is now without a Grand Slam title from her last 9 major appearances. Williams won the first set 6-1, but went down in 3 sets after this failed challenge on the final. Time now for a look at the weekend weather with Irina Seranic.
Good evening. Perth has a warm and dry week coming up. It was still relatively mild in the city today though, reaching 19.8 degrees at 20 to 2 this afternoon. The low was 8.1 at 6:30 this morning. Currently it's 15 degrees. It was a chilly morning through the wheat belt. Northam got down to 1 degree, while York had the lowest minimum of -1. Katanning got down to 3 degrees this morning, Albany 4, and maximum temperatures were in the mid-teens to low 20s through through the southern half. A very hot air mass is still lingering over parts of the north. Temperatures were well above average through the Pilbara again today. It got to 38 in Port Hedland, 39 in Karratha, and 40 was the top temperature at Marble Bar and Roebourne, as well as Fitzroy Crossing in the Kimberley. On the satellite image, there is a mid to high level cloud band that extends from southwestern parts of WA right across to Tasmania, with just the odd light shower recorded through southern parts today. Some of that cloud will hang around the south tomorrow, and some instability in the atmosphere will potentially trigger storms over the southeast of the state, but most of WA will be clear and settled under high pressure. Around the country tomorrow, heavy rain for Melbourne, up to 35 millimetres is possible. A wet day for Hobart and Adelaide too, although falls won't be quite as heavy. Partly cloudy in Brisbane and Canberra, sunshine for Sydney and Darwin. Back to WA, sunny skies right across the north tomorrow, although it will be a foggy start to the day in Broome and Derby. Strong winds in Carnarvon and Exmouth. A mix of sun and cloud through central parts of the state, along with a chance of showers in the southern goldfields, including in Norseman, daytime temperatures in the low to mid-20s. Showers and storms are possible in the southeast of the state. Only a slight chance for Esperance though. It'll be a cool morning with frost possible over inland parts of the southwest, warming up to the high teens in the afternoon. There is a strong wind warning for the West Pilbara, Ningaloo, Gascoyne and Geraldton coasts. While hot, dry and windy conditions have prompted a severe fire danger warning for the south interior. Sunny skies for Perth tomorrow. After an overnight low of 8, the city will head for a top of 19. Winds will be light in the morning with a southerly breeze arriving around lunchtime. A southeasterly flow on the Perth local waters up to 15 knots in the morning, turning southerly up to 20 knots in the afternoon. The swell will be between 2 and 3 metres. The sun will rise at 19 past 6 and set at 7 past 6. We've got some warm weather coming up in Perth, starting with Sunday when it jumps to a sunny 25 degrees. Easterly winds will pick up on Monday, pushing the maximum to 27 degrees, 26 on Tuesday, down to 21 on Wednesday, then climbing back up to the mid-20s by the end of the working week. And that's the weather. Now, James, before I hand back to you, since this is your last TV bulletin, the news team has put together a look back at the James we've worked with over the years. From your debut as a TV reporter.
The local government association says an increase in the number of trucks carrying grain will put more pressure on an already deteriorating road system.
To your debut as the 7 p.m. anchor.
The strong Australian dollar could prove to be an early Christmas present for shoppers as they swamp overseas websites for bargains. But it's more bad news for the state's farmers, already struggling through unprecedented dry conditions.
And many other moments in between.
All right, Clint Thomas from Perth
James,
Stadium.
that's all from here from Perth Stadium.
Sorry to interrupt. Thanks very much. Serena.
Over to you.
Across the nation, the Facebook page "We're Going on a Bear Hunt" is growing rapidly. Better hurry though, because I'm starting as soon as I get out of here. I'm going to catch a big one, and I'm not even scared.
It's 29 on Wednesday, 24 on Thursday, and 27 on Friday, James.
Thanks very much, Brian. And that is Irina, I'm sorry. Got stuff going on in my ear. It's been a crazy week.
So from myself, Brian, and all of us here at the ABC, goodbye and good luck. It's been so much fun working with you. And for the final time, it's back to you, James.
Thank you very much, Irina. Now, when I first sat in this chair, prime ministers served a full term. Isis was an Egyptian goddess, and Corona was something that you actually wanted to go to a crowded place to get. We're now into what feels like the 17th month of 2020, and I really hope that amid the uncertainty and anxiety and disorientation, I've been able to provide a small measure of consistency and constancy. Having said that, I am leaving, but I'm leaving you with familiar faces. Pamela Medlin and Charlotte Hamlin will share this chair from next week, and the news will roll on. And that is one of the really special things about this chair. You don't own it, you just look after it until you can hand it on to someone else. I struggle to really believe that I got to sit in it at all, let alone for 9 years. And I've tried my best to uphold the legacy of its former custodians and to honour the time and effort of my colleagues. Now, you hear this a lot, but I mean this with everything that I have when I say that it has been an honour, and it is one that rests entirely on your support. So thank you so much for letting me sit in this chair. That's almost all I have to say, except this is ABC News for now. I'm James McHale, and for the last time, take care, have a great weekend, and good night.